Jim, the weather, it's a case of not quite sure what's going to happen next because nothing is happening.
Well, no, around the country today they're getting a lot of rain, which is really good. We seem to be missing out on the east coast, especially from the greater part of Canterbury and parts of Marlborough. But it is dry, and I'm sure Tony will talk a little bit more about that as he did last week. It is critical in some areas, but as I've said before, in horticulture, we're not so bad as we do have the ability to irrigate most of our crops. And so we can actually, in a year of dry, we can actually control the water, therefore get a better production out of it. And that has transpired.
Seems to be a sort of a fairly late winter.
Hadn't started at all, Rob. We had that whiff of snow came through about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Thought, oh, this is going to be good. We're going straight from a sort of a short autumn into an early winter. We need it. Chilling is quite critical to horticultural crops, especially all the soft fruits, raspberries, all the cane fruits, and all the vines, and of course those beautiful apricots and peaches and what have you down in central Otago. And at the moment, we really have not had any cool temperatures at all. Years ago, about 20, 30 years ago, we used to look for 2,000 what we call chill hours in it through a winter, which means that the temperatures would be below 7 degrees, and sometimes the actual air temperature could be even lower than that. So we're not anywhere near that. We're still in the teens, very much in the teens. In fact, in the early 20s or around the 19s during the day, and sort of 7 to 9 at the evening. Far too warm. So everything's starting to think it's springtime. I was having a look at some buds on some fruit the other day, raspberries and some black currants, and they're thinking it's in September. I hope they stop thinking that, but the only way they will stop thinking that, and that is we need some cold frost, probably 2 or 3 in a row, and that will put them to bed, but it won't certainly be a sufficient cold temperatures to what we call take them into true dormancy.
That's a bit scary, because if they do end up coming into flower, oof, that's all that energy being used.
Well, not only that, that flower becomes sterile. It doesn't produce. So you lose that little bit of production. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if we aren't into probably losing 5 to 7% of potential production because of that this particular season. Seen it before a number of years ago. What I was saying was we used to look for 2,000 hours. We now really look hard for 11 to 1,500 hours. It's still sufficient, but it's only just sufficient. And normally by now, in fact, I could almost go on a rule of thumb, 9th of April usually is our first serious frost. Now, around the 9th of April, we did have that southerly come through, and I thought, oh, this is good.
Yes, this is normal.
Yep. The leaves are going to start really coming off. They were senescing, but they were hanging on like anything. They're still hanging on, although the winds, some of the northwest winds that we've been having throughout the east side of the island have taken some of those leaves off. Talking to some of the very good apricot and cherry growers in central Otago, what we call the outside scale or shell of the bud is starting to move a little bit early. Normally that's another month's time, once again, because it hasn't had a frost. So let's hope we have some hard, cold frosts. And I know that the general public won't think that's a very good idea, but
we normally get nice days afterwards, Jim.
Oh, absolutely, we do. Yeah.
Winter sprays?
Yeah, so having had those nice frosts and the leaves are off and the buds are all in bed, we need to make sure we've got good formulations of copper and maybe a clean-up insecticide on the blocks, whether they be apple trees or fruit trees or cane fruit. And that needs to go on pretty much starting any time now, even with the leaves still on there and the frost may not have actually come. We need to start to look at our copper programs. And what that does, it removes bacteria, it cleans up any trash that's on the trees from a disease factor, and it generally just looks after the buds and the leaf tissue that's going to come through later on in springtime. We need about 3 applications of that through the winter. Now in the old days, and still some of the older growers will still use Bordeaux and lime, which is an old way of putting on copper. It looks nice and blue, and it looks like the job's been done well. But actually, it's quite a big particle, and it doesn't really impregnate into the cracks and crevices that we really want it to. So I'd highly recommend that growers, and 90% of the growers now are using the cupric hydroxide type coppers, which are fine. Do leave a blue mark behind, but that vanishes reasonably quickly, and that's what the old growers don't like about it. But actually, it's doing a much better job, more efficient and more cost effective. More effective in terms of disease control and bacteria control, and you use less metal, so there's less copper going out there, way less than we used to use before, and we're well under the world standard, so that's very good for New Zealand.
And I guess herbicides comes into the conversation about now.
It does. Right now, once again, I always say it's better to start your herbicide program when the frosts start to come, and that helps to, because the weeds are trying to stay alive, and the frosts start to beat them to death. They take in the herbicide better, thinking it's going to help them, but it actually doesn't. It does quite the reverse. So it's time to have a look at what the weed spectrums are out there, and the blocks, apples and under grapevines, and that look a bit hairy at this time of the year, but that's fine. We can clean that up. But I would suggest, because of the warm conditions we're having, I wouldn't go near those vines and canes until probably towards the end of this month, May, or maybe into the early part of June, when I'm sure there'll be some frost. And then get into those weeds. Be specific.
So we're delaying herbicides a bit now.
Yes, well, I would delay them for at least 3 weeks, but I'd certainly prepare. It's a good time to go out and check your weed spectrum. If you've got, for instance, wireweed, you need to have a oxyfluorophane on it, which was one that really knocks out that weed and doesn't damage the cane fruit or the apples or anything like that. And if you just want a longer term weed control of, say, easy to kill stuff like clover and what have you directly under the trees, you'd look at a metsulfuron, or no, sorry, not a metsulfuron, a terbuthalazine type material. And if you've got harder to kill weeds such as the good old Californian thistle, which there's plenty of them out there, and mallows, you look at harder to kill herbicides that take those down too. And the oxyfluorophane is one that takes mallow down very well in horticultural crops.
Jim, what are the markets doing?
Well, in Europe we've got major problems. The onion growers and the potato growers that have been sending their produce over to those traditional markets and also into Japan, the market's extremely weak. The onion growers, they're almost putting a check in the bag as they send them off. It's not good, and unbelievably, our growing season for onions specifically and potatoes have been extremely good. The onions have got 3 or 4 good brown skins on them, so they hold very well, they'll last very well. The consumers will be very pleased and they're going to buy them at half the price. It's even going to be greater. Why is this happening? Why is it happening that apples are depressed in price over there? Why is it happening that soft fruits, raspberries, strawberries, black currants and the like, pears and what have you, are weak? It's because Mr. Putin continues to annoy the eastern side of Europe. And there's a lot of embargoes going on there, so the fruit's staying still in Eastern Europe and parts of Western Europe, but it's not going to Russia where it normally takes the top off the crop, as it were. And hundreds of thousands of tonnes of different produce and fruit and vegetables go to Russia each year, and that isn't happening this year. So it's staying in Europe, so it's depressing and making the markets very soft.
So briefly, where the hell are they getting theirs from?
Well, they have got some, obviously, facilities to grow products like that there, and the policy seems to be that if it has to be, the people will starve. And I mean, it's quite serious. And it's not a short-term fix either. There's no short-term fix to this. This could go on for quite a considerable amount of time. And I do hope that Merkel and those people that are working hard, and maybe David Cameron's back in there now, that they can really start to talk sense and have the Russian situation, embargo especially on food and produce, lifted sooner than later.
Ooh, very sobering thoughts, Jim. Thank you very much.